we are really pointing to is that we have forgotten, in some sense, what makes something true. If we recognize as men, culturally, that this is one of our gifts. Your word, your tongue, is your greatest weapon. It's also your greatest gift to the world. No, it's just the recognition of the reasonable role, right? Mother cannot initiate man. Mother makes boy, father makes man.
Scary in the same way that we're talking about. If there's something that you believe is true and have put all of your essence into, and suddenly that is proved to be false, is an incredibly destabilizing experience. And why ideologies are clung to so vehemently, because in a way it is your essence. You are losing your beingness, the part of you that has been constructed around an idea or an ideal.
Masculinity is not toxic. Masculinity is medicine. Welcome to the Remasculation Podcast. This show is dedicated to the exploration, celebration, and pursuit of healthy masculinity in the modern world, with a view towards helping end the battle of the sexes and bringing men and women back together by turning the battlefield of the culture wars into a garden once again. I'm your host, Michael Bates, and my mission is to ignite and accelerate the evolution of men everywhere across this planet in our lifetime in service of something greater, our shared humanity. Welcome.
Mountain, that is his real name. If you ask him, he'll tell you a great story about it, and maybe we'll end today with a story of his name. But in the meantime, what you need to know about Oak is this: he has a background in philosophy, Eastern traditions, and personal development, and he's engaged with all that inspires his heart and his mind. He brings forward a unique hybrid technique that applies the blended wisdoms of East and West to one's mind, body, and spirit, so that one's truth can rise above the confusion and take the driver's seat in your life. Arriving to this path of service has been Oak's goal since childhood, and by the unique mystery of the universe, he was given an experience that shifted his life forever, which brings us here and him to the show. Oak, it is a real honor to have you with us, brother.
Honor and a pleasure to be here and speaking with you again, Michael. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome, and I'll have you guys know this is kind of a continuation of a conversation. Oak was generous enough to have me on his podcast last week, and I think we could have talked for about 7 hours straight. And so it was easy to just pitch that right into this episode. But yeah, for you guys who are interested, Oak has a great podcast as well. The Smiling Human is what that's called. A little plug for you, Oak. And just again, it was a real blessing to be on your podcast, and grateful to have you here on mine. And we're going to talk about truth today. So what do you think about that?
I'm excited, man. There's nothing I enjoy more than a shared reasoning towards mutual understanding. So let it be.
Let it be indeed. Well, I thought we would start by positing the statement that you made actually on our last conversation that stood out to me in a big way. And we're going to talk about a lot of things today, but my real hope for this is that we can start to really speak to this aspect of truth, facts, beliefs, where we find ourselves right now in our culture here in the West, where as a result of postmodernism, we have been taking things lightly that were once taken seriously, let's put it that way. And all of the good reasons behind that, there have been some challenging ones where it's very difficult to know what anything means anymore, to have a sense of meaning or a sense of truth when it seems like the truth these days is a moving target. But in the spirit of that, the thing that you stated was this, Oak: your masculinity develops as your present moment awareness develops. Your masculinity develops as your present moment awareness develops. And I'd love if you can just pitch us into that, and we'll just get after it as far as what you meant, what that means to you, and how one can strive to go about partaking in that level of awareness.
Absolutely. So present moment awareness is the aperture through which all of our humanity is expressed. That is to say, whatever beautiful, ugly, powerful, scared, emotional, or neutral aspect that is contained within, that's a part of you, whichever one of those pieces is coming forward or is calling to be expressed, it's going to be expressed in the present moment. And we have an opportunity to either embody and imbue this present moment with intentionality, with wisdom, with gentleness even, or we can be reactive. We can be short-sighted, and we can be the unfortunate side of instinctual, we might say, because there's a deep wisdom in instincts, but this sort of gut reaction to things. And so insofar as it relates to masculinity, the development of any personal characteristic is going to be no different really than learning. And learning takes place in the present moment. And so as we are capable of developing our insight, our steadfast mind, and our present moment awareness, then the qualities of masculinity, which we can enumerate for the listeners as well, are more accessible therein.
Yeah, and I think it will be important to enumerate what some of those qualities are, just so that we're not speaking into a broad vacuum here. But I know a big part of the work I do and a big part of the work that you do with men is the capacity within which we can, and I think both of us would agree, must learn to develop that present moment awareness, that ability to pay attention in real time, pay attention to the intention that you bring to things. And that, at least for me, the ability to leverage both of those frames of intention with your attention is what allows us as men to be in and access that present moment awareness.
Absolutely. There's a piece here that I think might be an interesting dropping in point, which is that we can imagine the present moment in terms of development as the means by which we express, as I articulated previously, this masculine essence, but also it's the locus where we discover that which is our essence. So it is to say we find the gold and also express our heroism, perhaps, or our kingdom, both in this present moment. And the dance between the two of them is, as you've mentioned, predicated on the willingness and capacity to bring our attention to the present.
And as far as those qualities of masculinity that you allude to or that we're speaking towards, what are some things that we can say to sort of point this to something specific?
I think, you and I hit on some really powerful points in our previous conversation, and I'd encourage listeners to dive into that when it's released in the coming months here. One of the pieces that I want to start with is this bridge point of externalization. And so when we're talking about the qualities of masculine, we want to look at the things that make us unique from the feminine, that makes the male unique from the female, and it is this outward capacity. So I pitched to you the idea that masculinity is earned and femininity is preserved. This is something that we spoke to in the last conversation. And if that's the case, then we have to look at qualities that are, in some sense, only earned through action and time, and that can direct us to it. Such like we think about the capacity to provide, not even the capacity to provide. Let me be even more specific. The drive to provide, I would say, is masculine. Because the difference is, right, one can have the drive without the capacity and they're still enacting their masculine call, right? The drive to protect that which is innocent, that which is sacred, that which is valuable. That's a distinctly masculine aspect. I believe that courage relates to sacrifice is also a distinctly masculine characteristic. And the reason I bring in sacrifice to this, and I don't want to say uniquely masculine, but distinctly masculine, we'll say, is because when we look at our socio-cultural narrative of the last 200 to 2,000 years, we see this role of man necessitated for the defense of family and nation. And that men were and have been, and in some sense still are, expected to lay down their lives for the common good. And so this drive, this willingness to say, I recognize that my own independent life is not as valuable as something greater, be it virtue, be it principle, be it a nation, be it family. That drive, I believe, also is distinctly masculine. There's a lot of different pieces we can crack open into. So to reiterate, if you'd like me to,
please,
the qualities of the masculine are in relation to this externalized principle, the principle that masculinity is gained or earned and femininity is preserved. And so we look outside of ourselves and say, what do we as men or as the masculine end up actually earning? We might earn honor or dignity or love and respect in these kind of ways, or our place among society in a hierarchy of competence, perhaps. And to do so requires the embodied expression of our masculinity. And so in one sense, the drive to provide, the drive to protect, and the willingness to sacrifice oneself and the courage to do so for a higher principle, be that family, country, or something like this. I think all of those, it's not an exhaustive list, but I believe that those three at the very base are some distinctly masculine qualities. Now, insofar as it relates to communication and the work that I have been doing with my book and the workshops and the things that I facilitate, we can definitely notice that the caliber of masculine communication, the quality of it, the nature of it is far different than what we would say to be feminine communication. And we can acknowledge the application and quality as masculine. And what I want to say about this is that it's the same externalized principle, right? When we're looking to men or the masculine, what I see commonly in the coaching work I do is that the men I work with are really keen to provide immediate solutions to a problem that they think is present in the environment. And it's like, amen, thank you, great. However, when the energy is so externalized and so geared towards this desire to provide, what can get missed is the actual need of the moment, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, well, this is exactly it, right? And so when we're looking at this, we can bridge the gap between these masculine qualities and how they show up in communication by looking at this impetus, this drive, this almost compulsion to provide a solution. And there's one quote, I can't remember exactly who said it, but they were talking about, if you listen long enough, you'll realize that the problem you were trying to solve at the beginning isn't the problem that actually needs solved. And I think that's a really powerful piece, but there's a lot pitched there. I'll toss it back to you, Michael.
No, that's an incredibly powerful piece. There's so much in what you just shared. And again, just the premise of masculinity is earned, femininity is preserved is such a exquisite exploration of what we could unpack from that and make into a whole show as well. And drawing back to a question that I posited on your show, and one that comes from a mentor of one of the men that I'm co-leading this men's program with, the King's Code, who's a traditional elder in an African tradition. And this idea, the way that he framed it, and you spoke to it too, it's like this idea that we've, I think, shied away from or become afraid to answer in the West. And that is something along the lines of what makes a man as distinct from those who are not men. And these qualities of masculine and feminine, are there women that have a drive to protect the innocent? Certainly, of course, absolutely. And the utility of making this distinction between men and masculine as an ethos or as an essence of something that can certainly be carried by both genders and can also be expressed in many different ways. But something about the necessity of getting to the bottom of that particular frame of what makes a man as distinct from those who are not men, and starting as we did at the root biology of the problem. And problem, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's being phrased as a problem, but I certainly do not think masculinity or manhood or being a man is a problem. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing as evidenced by the show. But yeah, I mean, we talked about this on your show, but it's just such a beautiful piece. I wanted to bring it back here because it does feel like a good segue into this aspect of truth and verifying and verification and veracity that we spoke to last time, of the importance of being able to discern truth from falseness, or what is true versus what is not true, and that it isn't simply a matter of one's own truth trumps every other experience, that if we don't have absolute truths or truths that are shared by us as a collective, there is no collective. There is no collective anything. So yeah, how does that land for you this go around, Oak?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that opening up this realm of discussion by looking at the quality of language that surrounds this discourse is really important, because what you're speaking to really roots down to definition, right? To define, and fineness is the subtlety, right? It is the distinctness, the specificity. And so obviously, we know the distinctions between male and female, right? There's no intermediate zygotes. That's the line that I like to use when people are looking for a definition of male and female, right? There are bodies that produce ovum. There are bodies that produce spermatozoa. There's your binary. And how masculinity expresses itself beyond maleness becomes a realm of, in some sense, fluidity, but I like to say that it's probably greater expressed as a spectrum. And we spoke a little bit about this in terms of temperament, right? And so when we're looking at truth and veracity, we have to take into account the spectral nature of the distribution of temperament across populations and across genders. So that's to say, we understand that male is male and what makes male male, and that's a biological fact. Some people would maybe poo-poo the idea of biological essentialism, but they do that only insofar as and up to the point that they need antibiotics or surgery, which is, anyways, I'm not going to go down that road. So we understand that maleness is based on this, and we understand that there is a conglomeration of traits that tend to be found amongst men, right? More assertive in their language, larger physical stature, tend to be more physically aggressive, not harder to socialize, but more interested in things than they are people, just as an average. And it's one thing to talk about the physiology, and it's one thing to talk about the biology, but when we start to get into the psychological or the mythopoetic, this is where we get and we move away from a fact and we start to get into an experience of truth that exists in a different realm than the biological fact. And so when we're talking about, meaning or how postmodernism has muted our capacity to identify veritable truths, what we are really pointing to is that we have forgotten, in some sense, what makes something true. And so allow me, if I may, to walk us through three different areas of how we might identify that. The first being the instantiation in the living world. This is how we know something is true, because it has being. It actually is, right? And this is why we're talking about the difference between the spermatozoa and the ovum. Those are measurably distinct realities. They exist. Excellent. So now we have a reference point in the living world. That makes the truth of male and female a real thing in the living world. Now, masculinity and femininity, well, they fall on a spectrum. We have to say, is it true that all women are this way? Only if we're speaking about the things that are physically instantiated, right? But even then, we always find exceptions to the rule, but we have to remember that the exception doesn't make the rule. This is a key piece. So, okay, this is how we've worked in the biology. Now, when we're working in the temperament space, that's more a question of measurement and how one expresses oneself. And this might be a tangent to explore on how those who might feel non-traditionally masculine can express or discover their masculinity. That's a deep piece.
Certainly.
But in terms of the more than true, this is where it gets really interesting, because you say, well, what makes a man distinct from a man is, in some sense, yes, the biology, but it's also a willingness to take up what we might call the weight, the responsibility, or the burden that comes along with manhood. The saying, heavy is the head that wears the crown.
That's it.
There's a reason why this comes to be, is because just as there is responsibilities and things, we're obviously not speaking to the neglect or exclusion of the truth of what it is to be a woman and the challenges therein. But for the man, to be distinct is to claim that for oneself. It's a recognition that I've been given maleness, I've been given an essence of masculinity, and because of this externalized piece, it's my responsibility to go out, earn, and claim my own kingdom.
I love the way you articulated that. There's an impetus that comes from within. And again, we are in no way saying that a woman cannot experience these things. This is the frame of, as you said, the exception does not make the rule. And I certainly welcome people of all different pursuits, orientations, beliefs, and that uniqueness of experience does not eradicate the commonality that exists between the majority of people. So how do we do both? And I think we're nuanced enough in this realm, and I think those of you who are listening are nuanced enough to carry that forward in a way that can serve the good of the collective and the good of the individuals who find themselves in unique positions of exploration that serve all of us in their willingness to do so. And yeah, I love the way particularly you made these distinctions. And this feels like a really good map for our listeners out there and for anyone that's working to sort of piece things together in the wake of postmodernism. And again, I'll be the first to say that every movement has its blessing and its shadow. That's the unintended consequences of feminism that I think a lot of us are experiencing now came from a really beautiful place. But making these distinctions between the biological facts, the things that are immutable, that exist in nature, that are reproducible and visible, versus those psychological differences. You mentioning, the qualities or attributes, characteristics from the Big Five personality model, that women tend to be more agreeable and more polite than men, which is the piece that helps to explain why, despite there being nothing in written in law anywhere in the Western world that women should be paid less than men, that oftentimes women are paid less than men, because if you as a woman or a man are more on the agreeable front, you will tend to be paid less money for the same work than anyone, man or woman, who's higher in their disagreeable nature on that same metric of measurement. So again, I feel a lot of hope in these conversations, and why I wanted to have you on the show with your base of knowledge and your research background and philosophical background, and also the amount of care that I feel that you bring to this, and the way that I know you care about people. It's such an interesting thing to be in this conversation of what makes men as distinct from those who are not men, not to create division, but rather the opposite, but to bring us back together with something that we can build on. So not just the sand of the postmodern that seems to be a constantly moving thing and very difficult to build any type of structural foundation upon.
And it's on a foundation of truth that we find another branch that distinguishes the man's journey from any other. And that is that all story is based on a truth. Even the stories that are not true contain within them this essence, this trueness in one element or another. And our stories as men are different. And I think they also serve as the repository and archive for, luckily, us as the men in this postmodern world of wild anti-masculine, to draw upon and remember, to replace what we have been given with that which is authentic and related to truth about who we are, where we've come from, and what we can become.
Yes.
Because I think if we do look at this process, obviously the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell and the works of Mircea Eliade and the like, there's this recognition that in this earning process, there is a becoming. Even in the story of the prodigal son, right? There is this departure, this connection to this darkness, this tragedy, this malevolence, and then this transformation. Again, we talked about Iron John. There's a lot of stories that draw this in, and that story is uniquely masculine. And it relates in some aspect to obviously all people, and we've talked about this, but I think that's another answer to your question. Our stories are different, and the targets that we aim at in terms of how we express and embody our fullness as humans is different, unique.
Yes. And not better or worse than the stories of women or the stories of the feminine, but simply different. There's a famous argument that I remember hearing about from Robert Moore, who wrote King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, one of the a Jungian who wrote sort of the archetypal tome of the mythopoetic men's movement that became the Mankind Project, and Robert Bly's seminal work, the most important book I've ever read, Iron John, that he got into a famous argument with Maureen Murdoch, the woman who wrote The Heroine's Journey. And the argument, as I understand it, came from his statement of not that women don't go on a hero's journey. And you could make the argument that women don't go on a hero's journey. But what he said was that women don't go on a hero's journey because they're the destination that the hero is trying to get to. And I thought that was beautiful. And I am paraphrasing, but that there's something about these stories that are different. And I'm not in any way saying that there isn't a heroine's journey, that there isn't a journey that women go on. It's just different than men's in the way that the rites of passage and the onset of womanhood or manhood comes about through the internal or the external systems. Women's sexology is internal, and men's genitalia is external. Men have sex outside of their bodies, women have sex inside of their bodies. The rites of passage take place for women biologically. The menstrual cycle arrives whether they like it or not, and that the men's rite of passage from boyhood into manhood has to be done culturally, externally, from the outside. The men have to come and take the boy and transform him into a man, which is arguably why I think you and I both agree the degree of discord that we have in the West largely is because of the challenges of transforming from boyhood psychologically into manhood psychologically. But that there's, so much of the conflict that we're experiencing in the culture, the gender wars, or the whatever you want to call them, are simply a matter of misinterpreting these ideas that they can. The stories contain the ability, as you said so beautifully, to remember, to pull ourselves back together in a way where we can actually merge the traditionalism of these stories with the necessary progressivism of the modern moment and unify our being through these stories, through these opportunities to find unity by combining the best of both worlds. I just said a lot, so I'm going to have some tea and see what you have to say about that. Oh.
The distinction between the hero's journey and the journey of the feminine can be imagined in the representation of how it is we come to be born, right? Just like you mentioned in the act of sexual union, not only does the sperm leave the body and traverse an arguably hostile, dark, foreign environment, right? Because it has to be protected by all these other biological mechanisms to go and find this essentially what is the most valuable piece of energy, of life-giving,
the most valuable thing,
wholeness,
rail.
truly. And what happens when it meets? Well, the beautiful thing is that the egg actually selects, and I think you might know this, but the egg selects the sperm. It's not the first one. It's actually a selection process. And once selected, the sperm loses its tail. So it now is transformed in an irreversible way. And this is an interesting parallel to the narratives that you were talking to me about, how in most of the rites of passage and initiation, once a man has passed through the threshold and beyond the threshold of boyhood, they are marked in a particular way.
Yes.
And even in a lot of these myths that we see, the hero is marked in a particular way. They lose an eye, they lose an arm, something happens to them that they cannot take back. And it's almost this exchange that says, you must sacrifice, you must give something over, you must be willing to lose something from your past in order to cross the threshold into this meaningful land. And
that's it, man.
The
Whether
idea,
it's Horus or Odin or Luke Skywalker, right? It's like, that's it. It's there. It's the losing of something precious. Yeah, please. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go.
all good, beautiful contribution. The idea that the end goal is the feminine is an interesting one, because that seems, I noticed there's a rocky ground there that we might actually have the unconscious opportunity to elevate or pedestalize, to say, well, this is the goal, right? Woman is the goal. But I think that there's actually, instead of pedestalizing or dropping, we might actually look at it like a circle.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Where,
absolutely.
right, there is this departure from the feminine, there is this descent into the darkness, into the dungeon of the dragon, the loss of something meaningful, and coming back. But it's not coming back to mother. It is coming back to the feminine, but it's coming back to the feminine having changed in a meaningful enough way that that which is being returned can add value to the woman, such that when they enter into union, that value is shared with the community as a whole.
I don't know what you're up to, bro, but I can't wait to fucking read this book, because you're speaking to some things in a way that I don't know that I've heard anyone else speak to it, and putting some ideas together that have been rattling around inside of my head in a way that really lands some planes here, to say the least. So please keep going, whatever it is that you're doing. But that's it, right? And I think, as someone who myself, one of the sins I've committed in my life, and by that I mean missing of the mark, was to pedestalize the feminine. And I think a lot of the men who, like myself, the sensitive new age guys, the nice guys in recovery, I think took it and ran with it too far and did pedestalize the feminine as the thing to get to. And now I bow to the queen, and instead of being in service to life, as Joseph Campbell would say, becoming subservient to life, and life being the representation of the feminine as the vehicle for life itself. That is such a, again, Campbell's beautiful distinction between men as servants of life and women as vehicles or vessels of life. Not that, the ending of the battle of the sexes, and that we both play our part and we are equal. And even in the Old Testament, that man and woman were made equal and made equally. And there's two stories, right, of the creation in Genesis. That's such an interesting thing too. But I love it. This feels like the piece, and I have goosebumps talking about what happens when that union is made, and the arrival of the sperm through the darkness, the losing of the tail, the entering into, and then the magic of what the heck actually happens when a baby is born, and where that life comes from, the mystery of that, and the energy produced from that experience is, what is that? What is that? So
God's greatest gift.
Truly
One of,
God's
anyways.
greatest gift. Life itself.
I'd love to speak to this aspect of the pedestal, because I think we can relate it into a couple other aspects of masculine development. And what I noticed, and what was arising for me while I was listening to you, Michael, is that we pedestalize women as grown men if we have not been initiated, particularly because as children, mother is God. There is really no distinction. It is the all-giving, life-preserving, nurturing, and protecting force, period. And in orientation to that is mother is all providing and all present, hopefully. I'm reading a book called The Continuum Concept, which is really opening my mind to the role of the in-arms phase and the connection to mother. And I highly recommend it if you want to dive into that, particularly as it relates to masculine child development. It's not specifically about that, but it's great. So mother is God as a baby and as a child, and the child will, in some sense, begin to take this hero's journey piece by piece through the crawling phase, through the walking phase, and get farther and farther away from this home until, as you mentioned, they're taken by the other men.
Yes.
As far away from that warm, safe comfort as possible. Literally the opposite end, into the dark dungeon. Mama's not going to help you here. You got to do it yourself, right? Yeah. Your brothers are here, but ultimately it's your own journey.
Not to punish mother, or as a punishment to her.
No.
Far from it.
No, it's just the recognition of the reasonable role, right? Mother cannot initiate man. Mother makes boy, father makes man. And this is an interesting piece to look. Okay, so mother is pedestalized. And now when we find ourselves developing without this initiation, obviously our sex drives are online. We're looking at women. We feel this call to reproduce and to mate. Now woman also represents the discerning and selective force of nature. That which says, yes, you are good enough and your genes are good enough to perpetuate. So we have these two competing roles, which is very interesting to note. One that says you live or die by this judgment, and the other that says you live or die by her presence, which in some sense is judgment as well. So there is this deep seated recognition of the life affirming or life denying capacity that is innate within the feminine structure. Wow. And yes, buckle up, man, because if you're not ready to face that.
Oh, brother. And why it feels so, I think, so horrifying and terrifying, as it did for me as a young man, to approach a beautiful woman and to put myself on the line and just try to come up with something to separate myself from the field of all of the other men, and then to be rejected, feeling as though life itself was rejecting me, and why the collapse was so total in the wake of the feminine judgment of that I've been judged insufficient. And again, that could happen for a number of different reasons, but my goodness, what a wonderful distinction around living or dying by her presence as mother, living or dying by her judgment. Literally, your seed being passed on or not being passed on by her judgment from the mature feminine woman as potential partner. Yeah, outside of mother.
One of the reasons why that might be so catastrophic, Michael, is because it is the confrontation with the opposite energy. And what I mean by this is that mother is, in some sense, expected to be unconditional in her presence, her love, and her nurturing. Yet sexual selection is exclusively conditional.
Say that again, man, so everybody can hear it.
Sure. So one of the reasons why it might be so devastating to encounter rejection by the feminine as an unintegrated and uninitiated man is that our psyche expects or understands woman as mother to be unconditional in presence and in nurturing and in acceptance. And when we are dealing with the sexual selection process, it is exclusively conditional, judgmental, and discerning. It is a discrimination process necessarily. And so we have these clashing energies that says, well, my body, if I have not had all of my needs nourished by my mother through development, still yearns and seeks for the completion of this unconditional love. So this is present. And we bring this to a woman. We go, hey, I thought you were cute, wanted to come say hi, and curious if you'd like to grab coffee. I'd love to get to know you. And she goes, no, I am not interested at all. And you're like, I am going to die. That's what the body says, literally in response. That's yes. What is triggered, because that yes. same, it's an enmeshment, and it's sort of a dirty and muddy enmeshment, but it's an enmeshment of those two energies of trying to step into this masculine union process, the individuation that then steps into union, but you're still clinging to the unindividuated aspect of you that is tied into mother. It's an incredible process.
Wow, that's a whole other level to it. My inner 14-year-old and 21-year-old and heck, 25-year-old, 35-year-old is dancing in a circle with joy to know that he's not just a coward or a crazy person or a sissy for feeling so rejected on the back end of working up the guts to actually go and talk to her versus sitting at home and berating yourself for not having the guts to talk to her. Then you go talk to her, and the reward for your trouble, young man, is the sense of existential doom because your body has just been rejected and your genes may not be passed on. It's such a talk about mythopoetic. I mean, it's beautiful. And again, oh, fuck, brother, this distinction that you're making between the psychological realm of the mythopoetic that is not absolute, and then the necessity of having the biological realm that does work in absolutes, that you get pregnant or you don't, you live or you die. You can argue about it and talk about it and call it whatever you want, and nature doesn't care. It's just naturing, and it does, but not in that way. You know, it's such a useful. I hope all of you listening can hear that and experience the sensation that I'm experiencing and feeling that of this sort of relaxation in my body of this battle, this war that's happening out there, in the battle of the sexes and the battle of ideology right now, when both perspectives are useful and necessary to come to the force and essence of truth, which is essentially what this episode is about, this essence of being able to come to a sense of truth and a verifiable truth. So I'd love to go to that. It's not even tangential. It's what we're talking about, this idea of truth and the ability to verify truth. And right now, the inability as a culture to step into a meaningful way of debate, of back and forth to determine whether or not we're correct in our assumptions. And I think it can be scary in the same way that we're talking about. If there's something that you believe is true and have put all of your essence into, and suddenly that is proved to be false, is an incredibly destabilizing experience. And why ideologies are clung to so vehemently, because in a way it is your essence. You are losing your beingness, the part of you that has been constructed around an idea or an ideal. What would you say to that, Oak? And how can we as men, but as humans, come to understand these varying degrees of truth and the necessary utility of absolute truth and relative truth?
The reward of the young man rejected by the woman is the same reward as the one whose beliefs have dissolved in the presence of truth, and that is the gift of death. And you mentioned it as destabilizing, and what I wanted to say was maybe only the first couple of times, because the difference that makes a boy, well, what makes a warrior? What makes a king? What makes the courage of a man worthy of admiration is one who will look into the face of death and say, yes, with his full being. And that's the piece of recognizing that, you know, the men who go out and are able to talk to many beautiful women have gotten a lot of rejection. They have died 1,000 times by the words of women, and great, right? Those who are intellectually admirable, who offer forth genuine wisdom, have allowed their beliefs to die 1,000 times as well. And this is the piece that I think speaks to, maybe not directly, but in some part to your question, Michael, is that humility is a willingness to die internally. When we are looking at the convoluted and distorted landscape of, quote, truth, unquote, as it relates to our political ideologies or our sociocultural narratives, what we're looking at is people, myself included in circumstances, don't think I am sinless in this sense, who are unwilling to die. And that makes all of the difference, right? When we are in this state of self-preservation, and I don't mean genuine self-preservation, I'll come back to this, we'll put a pin in that. But when we're in a state of self-preservation, our capacity to empathize drops precipitously. And so the reason I say it's not genuine self-preservation, and this is something I work with my clients a lot in mindfulness and our communication trainings, is, look, when you articulate an idea and associate it with an emotion that you believe to be a part of you, you have now created a branch out of your sense of self that is not made of yourself. It now stands as another thing that can be threatened and therefore trigger your fight or flight response and put you into a defense mode. And so recognizing that, one, if we want to have meaningful conversations and be able to navigate these nuances, to discern genuine truth from relative truth from utter bullshit, then our need is in the capacity to recognize that we are likely wrong most of the time about our beliefs, and that if we are willing to prioritize shared understanding based on facts and prioritize empathy for the experience of the other person, now the ground is laid where we can actually reach and say, it's not even about the fact that we believe different things. It's about the fact that you, as a human, as a brother, as a sister, are expressing yourself likely from a place of deep need. And if I am so up in arms about defending this grafted on sense of self, which is really just a belief, not only am I completely ignorant to the fact that you're coming from a place of need, but I'm going to be utterly useless in facilitating, if possible, that need being met, and vice versa. And to add one final point, when we speak about union, not just between men and women, but we're talking about communion, community, coming into oneness. There's a sense that all of existence is relational. And when I tap into that, I feel my humanity. I feel so alive in my body, Michael, when I dwell and contemplate in this reality, because the other is welcomed into self. That's empathy, right? And we can open those doors, we can build those bridges through the quality of our communication and how we are translating our inner world externally, and also how we translate the external world into our understanding. The language of our translation is as much a quality that determines openness versus closeness as the other.
Yes. I too feel the aliveness in my body when I dwell on that reality oak, and when, as I've experienced now for the second time in a row in communing with you on these topics, and doing our best to die if necessary, and the necessary deaths I feel you have faced in your ability to come to grips with these concepts to the degree that you have, and be able to speak to them, to come into union with them, and what it means to commune and come into union. This is the impetus behind all of my work. I know it's the impetus behind yours. And it just, again, continues to restore my faith in humanity. And for any of you all listening out there, we are going to fucking make it. We are, because of this aspect and this element of the human technology that I know lives in all of us. And I can feel grateful for those dragons out there that are placing themselves between us and each other, that are forcing us from ourselves and from each other. Because even in their success, they're simply just making us stronger, and making that opportunity and moment of reconnection and communion all the stronger when it happens and as it happens. And for those who have died enough times, the fear does evaporate. And for all of you young men out there, the pickup artist did have this one thing right, which is just practice. Talk to another girl, talk to another person, test your ideas. For God's sakes, like, what a gift to have an idea that you hold as gospel killed, so that you can cease in your fruitless worship of a false idol, a false god, essentially, and have that brought forward and be a part of the act of collectively determining what is true. And the sacredness of that, the sacredness of clashing swords of ideas, so that we can figure out what works for both of us, instead of you and I killing each other across a fucking battlefield yet again. And so this is the whole thing. This is the whole thing, as it seems to me. And where we find ourselves collectively right now, at this wonderful opportunity.
I'd love to share a story with you, and at the end, it may not be a hero's journey, but it'll definitely bring us to a tying point. So a few years ago, I was living in Mexico in Puerto Vallarta, and one year for my birthday, which is coming up in about a month here, a dear friend of mine, Andrew, if you happen to listen to this, Andrew, I love you. Thank you so much. He gifted myself and my partner at the time 2 necklaces, and my partner opened hers first, and it was corn, like a corn cob carved in green Mexican stone.
Wow.
And I opened mine up, and it's this spiral, kind of looks like a letter B, but spirals around. And I'm like, I know what corn looks like. I recognize this. And I was like, what the heck did you give me? I don't understand what this is. And so he's explaining, he says, look, in Mexican culture, men and women were given different gifts. And the women were given the gift of the corn, which is this planting, this nourishing, and this cultivating. And the corn gives so much to the Mexican people, right? Mm-hmm. So much to all of the cultures, because there's a lot of different cultures in Mexico, a lot of different languages, a lot of different people. And I said, okay, well, Andrew, what the heck is this thing? And he said, this is the symbol for the word, because it is believed that the men were given the gift of the word, of speech.
Wow.
And so and it's really interesting, because if you put your hands, I wonder if I can do this on the camera. If you put your hands together and you link them together, they make this sort of spiral like this. And half of this spiral is the necklace. But you put them together, this is communication. This is union through the word. And it's a very, very powerful symbol. And so when we're speaking about we're going to make it, one of the pieces I want to say is that, we'll make it there in in greater time, perhaps, if we recognize as men culturally that this is one of our gifts. Your word, your tongue is
Yes.
your greatest weapon. It's also your greatest gift to the world. And if you hope to support the work that Michael is doing, or that I'm doing, or that other men across this planet are doing to elevate our own masculine consciousness and bridge the gap between the masculine and feminine, the first place to start is with your own speech.
Yes.
Because there is no greater failing than self-deception, and all other deception and lies, distortion that comes from false speech, flows from self-deception. And so really honing in, am I speaking the truth? And if you don't know, you can speak truthfully without knowing what's going on. An example would be, I'm not entirely sure. I think it might be this, but just so you know, I don't have a great degree of certainty. This is just what I think. That's true. That's true. You don't have to be spitting facts all the time. But again, this humility and this attunement to putting forth only that which is most valuable, i.e., if it's, your greatest swimmer, so to say, if it's your greatest word, if it's your courage, if it's your open heart. But again, starting with the speech is so key.
It is so key, man. And that's, I think, why so many of the masculine traditions across this planet throughout history and anthropology have had some version of the maxim of tell the truth, even if it leads to your death. Tell the truth, veritas, tell the truth, the practice and process of telling the truth. And
the truth kills. And that's a really important and actually innately valuable aspect of it. Yes. Because when we're talking about trying to hone in on the capacity to differentiate and discern nuances in rhetoric or ideology or ideas, only when we enter into an arena where truthful discourse is permitted, promoted, and the mutual goal, do we actually have the opportunity to set to death all of the other BS and distorted views.
That's it. Which is why the First Amendment is the First Amendment in this country, and free speech is the cornerstone from which all true freedom and independence arises. It has to be. It has to be. And you said something, man, that cut me to the core, brother, because I spent a lot of my life in falsehood. I spent a lot of my life as a liar. I learned to lie as a young person, to self-regulate the emotional intensity of the world that I was experiencing. And I discovered that if I just changed things a little bit in my mind, it would make things better, or better for me in that moment. And so this white lying habit sort of emerged for me. And it's something I have to check even today. It's something that was fundamentally predicated on a belief that I myself was not enough as I was, and that my presence wasn't enough to create stability or emotional peace in the frame in which I emerged. And so while I have compassion for that part of me, it is a part of me that has created the greatest degree of difficulty and challenge in my life, both in romantic relationship and personal relationship to myself. And so for you listening, please know that I don't believe Oak is, and I certainly am not promoting myself as the end all be all of truth itself. That I am not a liar, but I have worn a liar's clothing, and that is certainly I think the truth for all of us. And so this idea of what you just said, the truth kills. I love that. I love that in the sense of how do I kill the falsehood in me, and how do I be willing to burn the aspects of me that are not true away, particularly if they feel like me. And that destabilizing, almost insane feeling that I've been experiencing these last few months as I've taken a break from the podcast, to disintegrate, to be annihilated in the breaking down of my last relationship and losing the relationship with my fiance, and having to take responsibility for the places in my life where I was not bringing truth. And the fact that I wasn't doing it consciously in certain aspects doesn't excuse the fact that that was there, or that it resulted in what it resulted in. So there's a beautiful saying in Greek from an inscription in a monastery on Mount Athos that I've been trying to live by and do my work by. And it's this idea that if you die before you die, when you die, you will not die. And if you allow your falsehoods to die, if you allow the parts of you that are not true, if you face death, if you look death in the face, as you said, which is such a beautifully masculine thing, not that women don't or the feminine doesn't, but we come through the body of the feminine, Mother Earth, the life aspect of the equation and the death aspect of the equation. There's something in that an pathanis, prim pathanis, dentha pathanis, otan pathanis. If you die before you die, when you die, you will not die. So let this conversation with you be a reaffirmation of my own dedication to the truth as I admit my own falsehoods and the parts of me that have believed they needed to be or make themselves into more or less than they really are because I wasn't enough as I am. That's that's something I'm committed to putting down and becoming more of a truth teller, even as we have these conversations. And I presume to know what the heck I'm talking about any of this. So it's a real honor to rap on this with you, brother.
Thank you for your authentic vulnerability, Michael. My heart beats with yours, brother. I really feel that.
I feel
you display courage and authenticity in that. So thank you. And I know that brings value to the hearts and ears of those who listen. That inscription is something that also crosses my mind. I didn't know it was in Greek or where it had come from, but I'd heard this adage before. And
yes,
one of the things I encourage when I'm working with people is, look, there are some things that you have to do, and that there are some things you can let be done by the laws of nature. And this death process is one of those things. It's actually really nice when we don't have to feel responsible to do the things that feel the most hard, right? Like letting die or you could say killing aspects of yourself is so anti our nature. Yeah. Every part of us will rise in resistance. However, if we do something that is within our capacity and responsibility to do, which is to say, as best as we can, as often as we can, speak the truth, no matter how scary, then necessarily all of those other parts are going to, by consequence and the law of resonance, dissipate, disappear, and die. It reminds me, if we're talking about Greek, it's give unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Yes.
Let the universe take from you what is not yours to keep. You don't have to give it away. You don't have to throw it away or rip it out. Align with the places and the practices that affirm your greatest expression of self, and the rest will happen. Not easily necessarily, won't necessarily be pretty or pleasant. Maybe it will be, but it will happen naturally.
Yeah, may that be so. May that be so. May the nature of that truly reveal itself to all of us. And I think it will. I think it does. I think it does. I think this is a part of how it does. And I know you had brought a topic as I had asked you to do, and I think we kind of got to it, but is there maybe anything else there or final pieces for you to sort of take this baby home?
The arena into which you express and practice your greatest expression of masculinity is the here and now. It's here and now that we speak truthfully. It's here and now that we face the difficult truths of rejection, of death, of fear. And you have the power, dear listener, by your will and choice to orient towards this present moment with courage, with willingness. That alone is enough to change the heart and mind.
Yes.
So know that Michael and I definitely have faith in you.
We certainly do. And for those of you looking to take that a step further, I would even suggest that the two practices that help the most on both ends of the equation, from the sword to the heart, let's say, is some type of a martial practice that is beautifully unforgiving, and nothing brings you into the present moment like being punched in the face or being choked out by a friend like I was yesterday in Barton Springs in here in Austin. Thanks be to Silas and Dave for that beautiful experience. And then on the other front, the meditative aspect, the ability to bring one's locus of attention fully into the present moment with regularity and show up here now, out of the thinking mind. Anxiety and depression exist not here. Depression is fixation on the past, anxiety, fixation on the future. It's very difficult to be depressed and sweaty at the same time, as one of my coaches liked to say back in the day. So whatever you can do, gentlemen, ladies, friends, to cultivate that locus of your attention in the here and now, yeah, things really change. It's a beautiful way of saying it, brother. And yeah, it's time to bring our initiation to the men of this world, because if we don't, life will bring it to him on her own terms. I think James Hillman said something along those lines in the Soul's Code, or one of his works. But brother, what a freaking honor to be on here with you. And I'm so excited to get to know more of you and to hear more of you and to learn more about you. I would love it if you would share with our listeners where they can find your work, when this book is going to be on the shelves, so I can buy the first one, signed copy, and put it in a glass case somewhere for posterity. But yeah, tell us about you, brother.
Absolutely. So you can find me on the internet at The Smiling Human. That's thesmilinghuman.com, The Smiling Human on Instagram. If you're curious about anything that I've talked about today, working with me, or you want to be the first one to know about when the new podcast comes out, go to thesmilinghuman.com, scroll to the bottom, add your name to the email list. That's the easiest and best way to find it. Feel free to reach out on Instagram as well. I'm around. I may not be posting every single day, but I definitely reply to messages. In the Instagram bio, you can find a link to my book, What in the Word. It's been out actually for a little over a year and a half now. It's not entirely on the topics that we have talked about, but it is on the art of speech and the power of language. It's historical, it's psychological, it's philosophical. It is the thesis of, we might say, my ontological understanding of the universe and language. So,
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. What is the term? Sapiosexual. That's the thing, right? There's something that you have about your skill with language that I appreciate about all humans, and not in the sexual realm. That's something for someone else, as cute as you are, Oak. But there's something about the thing too about language, that when it is beautifully articulated, crafted, spoken, there's something that draws you into it. So just a nod to your capacity to carve and cultivate your skills in this way, that I think allows your listeners to find themselves, or more of themselves, through the way you've trained yourself to be able to articulate your version of truth, and your capacity to be in service of the truth, a greater truth, something beyond you, and in service to something greater. So what an honor, man.
you blessed me with your words, brother. Thank you for the honor and the opportunity to be on here.
My pleasure. Truly indeed. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.